Your fantasy season is beginning. It's week 1 and the most important time of the year. Here are 7 players you need to add now before the week 1 games begin. And this one is a no-doubter that AJ Dillon is the cheapest he will be all season right now, and you need to act now. So here's what you want to know. Packers head coach Matt LaFleur, this beautiful man, has stated that he views Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon as 1A and 1A this year. Now, I do believe Aaron Jones is still going to be the primary back, but it's going to be a lot closer than many people expect. And a lot of head coaches get asked about their running back situations, and they'll say, yeah, that guy's our guy. He's our number one, and they'll clear up any confusion. Here, no, Matt LaFleur made it a point to say AJ Dillon is basically just as good as Aaron Jones. And Aaron Rodgers has stated many times this offseason that he wants his best 11 players on the field, and that includes Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon, who he says he believes can catch 50 balls each. And now this is saying something that would be a career high for Dillon. Now check this out. Last year, AJ Dillon, between his targets and carries on a per game basis, averaged 13.2 targets and carries, second highest in the NFL for a quote-unquote backup, meaning he has a strong role regardless of if Aaron Jones is healthy or not. In fact, with Aaron Jones healthy for the large majority and basically the entire season last year, Dillon was top 20 in rush attempts. And he improved as a pass catcher, something he wanted to do heading into last year. These are his college numbers. In 3 college years, 35 games, he only had 21 receptions. And then he had just 2 receptions his rookie season. It seemed like much of the same, until he made an active effort to improve as a pass catcher, which resulted in by far a career-high 35 receptions. Up until this point in his career, college and the NFL, he only had 23 combined receptions. 34 last year is good news. 50 plus is in the cards this year. And not only did he catch more passes, he was really good on those. Both route running and yards after the catch. He ranked 4th amongst all running backs in yards per route run, which is the ultimate running back efficiency and receiving efficiency metric. This is very good. And with Devontae Adams gone, it's only going to lead to more potential targets for a guy like Dillon, who should be on the field more. So trade for Dillon immediately and then get this next rookie wide receiver. And that's George Pickens, who after week 1, listen closely, he might become untouchable in fantasy, meaning your league mates aren't going to want to trade him, so go get him now. I mean, after all, he appears to be the wide receiver 2 already, ahead of Chase Claypool, even when Claypool was healthy, when you look at just camp participation, the joint practices, and yeah, the preseason usage of the starting unit. And looking at the preseason numbers, George Pickens ran the most routes of any Steelers starting wide receiver when it came to the starting unit being on the field, not after that. And this does not factor in when Deontay Johnson got hurt. This is just looking at the 2 games and like the first quarter before Deontay got hurt in the 3rd preseason game. And he's running a lot more than Chase Claypool, who's operating as the big slot receiver, which is good news for Claypool's role, but he's just not going to be on the field as much. So Pickens has a solid role in this offense already. And now Deontay Johnson is dealing with a shoulder injury, and Chase Claypool has already been dealing with a shoulder injury for most of camp. But that's not all, because Pittsburgh already has to replace about 25% of their targets, 163 from last year, almost 30% of their downfield usage in air yards, and that's good news for George Pickens, who's going to be on the field a lot. And this is Pickens' week 1 matchup, Eli Apple, who was getting roasted left and right last year during the playoffs. He's at best an average cornerback, and he struggled down the stretch. So if Pickens does indeed light him up for a 20-plus yard touchdown, for 50 to 80 receiving yards, yeah, there ain't no way your league mates are going to want to trade this electric rookie. So send those trade offers now and then target this running back. So here's the deal. Kenneth Walker had hernia surgery, and there's no clear timetable on his return timeline, but it seems like he's going to miss at least some time, at least 1 game, which means that Rashad Penny is no longer going to be in this split backfield with the rookie Kenneth Walker, but it's going to be his main backfield to try and get his full job. And Penny was the most efficient running back. Yes, I did not stutter. The most efficient running back in 2021. Let me explain. The final 7 weeks of fantasy football. So it's a decent sample of how much volume he was getting here. He had more points than Eckler, Jonathan Taylor, 44% more points than Alvin Kamara during this time. The guy is clearly good when healthy, and there's more. Seattle made Penny a top 15 paid RB at the time of this contract this offseason. He's due about $6 million, with 88% of that in guaranteed money. It doesn't seem like a lot, but for the running back position, this is a lot of money. And now with the investment and Pete Carroll being the head coach, who's known to let good running backs, guys who are on a hot streak, continue to get the ball and give them the full workload, that's good news for Rashad Penny now, as he's going to get that opportunity right away week 1. So you want to acquire him before this happens and then trade for this next rookie. And that would be the 8th overall pick, a top 10 pick in this past NFL draft, and that's Atlanta Falcons wide receiver Drake London. And the average top 10 fantasy wide receiver pick in fantasy finishes as a top 25 wide receiver. That is very solid, because right now that's not where he's going drafted, and it's not where he's being started in fantasy leagues. Plus, London is far better than the average top 10 wide receiver prospect. I mean, check this out. In 8 games last year before getting injured, just 8 games, he had 88 receptions, so 11 receptions per game, 15.5 targets per game, and he had 136 receiving yards per game. These numbers were absolutely phenomenal. Think of him as maybe a little bit bigger version of a Michael Thomas who can actually win downfield more often. And the crazy part of all this, at least to me and probably to you, London just turned 21 years old this summer, literally like a month to a month and a half ago, which means he was 19 and 20 years old when he was dominating college football as the best wide receiver in the NFL draft. And oh yeah, not to mention, he's the clear number 1 in Atlanta. Of course, Kyle Pitts is there, but in terms of wide receivers that are on the depth chart behind him, you have Bryan Edwards, who has 45 career catches, and the Las Vegas Raiders could not wait to trade him away quicker after his first 2 years of letdown. You have Olmedid Zaccheaus, who has just been a guy, 88th in wide receiver efficiency last year and has never been able to separate at this level. And then there's veteran Damiere Byrd, who has never topped over 50 catches in a season, more of a downfield deep ball type specialist, which is not really going to fit this offense all that well in my opinion. So it's clearly Drake London when it comes to receivers on this team. Get him and then get this next breakout player before they break out. And that's the beautiful running back in Chase Edmonds, who's the newest Miami Dolphin. And this is pretty crazy, but Chase Edmonds since 2019 is a top 5 efficiency back in the entire NFL. He has never finished outside the top 8 in yards per touch. When he gets touches on a per touch basis, his production is elite. But the issue is he's never been given the full workload, whether there was another starter who was getting paid more ahead of him or maybe just his size earlier on. But last year, when given the full workload twice when James Conner missed, he ended up seeing 19.95 fantasy points per game and 7 targets per game. Now these numbers, 7 targets per game, would have led the entire NFL for running backs last year. And the only running backs to average more than 19.95, so about 20 fantasy points per game last year, were Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry, and Austin Eckler. So he would have finished right around the top 3 running backs with these numbers had they sustained. That's how versatile, dynamic with the ball in his hands Chase Edmonds is. And get this, we were just discussing how other running backs like a James Conner or a Kenyon Drake in the past have been paid more than him, so the team was urged to put them on the field more. Now, Chase Edmonds is that guy in his backfield. He was given a contract this offseason, 2 years, $12 million. He's now paid 2 times more than any other running back in this backfield. He is now the guy the team invested in, the first free agent running back off of the waiver wire. It shows that they wanted him and they prioritized that with their wallets. So Edmonds is now viewed as the running back 1 in Miami, meaning you should trade for him before he breaks out and then get this next wide receiver. And that's the rookie wide receiver for the Washington Commanders in Jahan Dotson, who you don't even have to trade for because he's available in waiver wires in 79% of leagues. Absolutely crazy. And this is crazy to me because he's a clear starter in Washington. Why are you not starting the guy? He's dynamic. And in terms of what the starting unit saw in the preseason, which those snaps do matter. Do not let people tell you otherwise. If so, those guys are probably finishing 4th to 8th in their fantasy leagues. But Jahan Dotson played every single starter snap, all 18 with Carson Wentz, was actually one more than Terry McLaurin, who came off the field while Dotson stayed on in one wide receiver set. But that's not all. Because of course Terry McLaurin is great, but this is another quarterback right now, and because Terry McLaurin was holding out for lots of mini camps and parts of camp, Jahan Dotson got more reps with Carson Wentz, and he has started to become Carson Wentz's favorite and go-to target during camp. That is something, again, 79% of waiver wires he's on. Go get him. And now if you watched any Big Ten football last year or the year before, you know Jahan Dotson is special. This man earned 146 targets at Penn State last year. The only reason he didn't go drafted higher than the 16th overall pick, which yes, he was a first rounder already, but he wasn't a top 10 pick, was because he had shaky quarterback play at Penn State. But he was elite at commanding targets. His 33% target share, that's the amount of his team's targets that he saw, a third of them. 1 out of every 3 passes from his quarterback went to this guy. Yeah, that was top 4%, 96th percentile of all time in college football. That's how rare we're talking about here. And in terms of rankings, my weekly rankings, I'm well ahead of the consensus. I have Dotson 47 spots ahead of the average wide receiver rank for this week, which is just absolutely crazy. Get him off those waivers. Now, if you want to see my weekly rankings, projections, and player notes for every single fantasy relevant player, and you'll get a $20 Amazon gift card, then click the link in the description below and follow the 2 simple steps to acquire my weekly cheat sheet for fantasy football. It's going to put you levels ahead of your competition. And this is not just for 1 week, it's for the entire season. And if for some reason you don't like it, I'll refund your $10 minimum deposit, and you can keep the weekly cheat sheet every single week and the $20 Amazon gift card. Yes, it is risk-free, people. So if you want to join the thousands of people using that information right now and smack around your league mates, click the link in the description to learn more. So see if Dotson is on the waivers ASAP and then get this rookie RB. And stick with me here, but Brian Robinson, the Commanders running back, he was placed on the non-football injury NFI list. He'll miss the first 4 weeks, but he's eligible to return as soon as week 5. So now here's what you need to know. Robinson was a victim of a gunshot wound, multiple gunshot wounds he was shot at on August 28th, a Sunday, in a potential car robbery. Now, thankfully, none of these injuries were life-threatening, and Robinson actually left the hospital 24 hours later on Monday after he had surgery, and according to Mike Garafolo, the bullet passed through the knee and missed all the vital parts of the knee. We're talking about did not hit the bone, did not hit any ligaments, did not hit any major vessels. This is as lucky as it gets, and this is great news. So now here's what this means for fantasy football. Robinson has a realistic chance to play week 5 or week 6 of this year, and right now he's available in 58% of leagues. So go ahead and add him and then put him on your IR list. Why not? Because the team clearly does not trust Antonio Gibson, who Robinson won the job from in camp from the veteran, and how can you blame him? This list where he leads, this is not a good one to lead. He led the NFL with 6 fumbles last year, and then he fumbled on his second touch of the preseason this year, and quickly from there, Robinson started to become the guy. So if Gibson was to fumble once in these first 4 or 5 weeks before Robinson is potentially back, yeah, his job is absolutely gone when Robinson gets back, and it likely is either way. Because the team aggressively signed J.D. McKissic back, they re-signed him after Buffalo basically had a deal done with him. Washington went under the table and was like, no, guy, we're going to give you more money. Come back here, come back to Washington. They wanted him back because they were like, yeah, we can't trust Antonio Gibson on third down passing snaps. We trust you way more. And then they drafted the third rounder, the elite size speed athlete, and Brian Robinson. So here's your takeaway on this situation. Antonio Gibson is basically one fumble away from being sent to the shadow realm and not seeing another touch for this team for quite some time. And if Brian Robinson is able to return around week 5 or week 6, he's likely going to be at the very worst in a 50-50 backfield and quickly becoming the starter yet again in Washington. And being proactive will help you here because, like we said, he's available in 58% of leagues. You could probably trade for him for not that much, but as every single week goes by and people don't have to wait as long to see Robinson back in action, you're not going to be able to trade for him. He's not going to be on as many waiver wires. So right now, as you're watching this, make it a priority to see if he's out there, scoop him, put him on your IR, and then see if you can trade low for him with your league mates. So these have been 7 players you want to trade for before week 1 begins. And if you want to see 7 more players that you should be adding now off your waiver wire before week 1 when they become way more expensive to add next week, well then check out this lovely video right here. And my guess is the 3rd player in that video, a sneaky running back, will surprise you. Hey, if you're not already, hit subscribe.